Je refusais de parler sur un son aussi beau. Bienvenue ce soir au Royal Monceau. Vous venez de voir un film, évidemment que nous attendions tous. Et vous, sans plus attendre, je vous demande d'accueillir Rami Malek, Freddie Mercury et Gwilym, Rami Malek, qui vont nous rejoindre dans quelques instants sur vos applaudissements qui méritent amplement. Merci de votre accueil. Hey, standing ovation, you guys. You deserve it all.
Merci beaucoup.
All right, well, my first question will be to you two. Of course, iconic man, iconic band, Queen, iconic sound, and certainly Bohemian Rhapsody is very much so. I wanted to know, how did you each react when you knew you would be Freddie Mercury and of course Brian May on screen? And more precisely, how did you make this iconic into the intimate?
You have to go first because I'm a bit overwhelmed at the moment.
Well, I mean, I acted with Euphoria, which didn't stop for a good few days. My feet didn't really touch the ground. I still find it very surreal to say, my name's Gwilym Lee and I play Brian May. It never sounds quite right. But with that euphoria also came a sense of responsibility and a certain amount of trepidation and fear to try and do justice to this legend, this icon that is loved by so many, who is so unique, and not just that, but to represent the music and the story of the band. But fear is a good motivator, and it meant that we translating at the same time.
No, absolutely.
Okay, sorry.
Go for it.
Okay.
Oh, that's what I'm hearing. Yes, okay.
Yeah, you're not hearing voices.
But yeah, so any time that I felt slightly overwhelmed by the prospect, it just motivated me to try and get on with the things that I can control, to work on the music and the guitar, which is very important for me and a really tough task for me, but to work on the gesture, the voice, the physicality, and try and just do things day by day. Don't think about the big picture, but just try and be at work every day and work as hard as you can and be there for everyone else on set and put in some hard graft.
What about you, Rami?
Bonsoir tout le monde.
Bonsoir.
Je suis très content d'être à Paris avec tout le monde. Something like that?
Yeah, totally.
The first question, I guess, of course, you hear the news that you're playing this character and immediately I think your heart almost stops. Mine almost did. I guess I'm the only person who actually gets to react that way hearing the news of Freddie Mercury being someone that I get to play in a film. It is absolutely euphoric. There's a moment of elation like I've never felt in my life. And it's the same type of adrenaline rush, I think, as it was playing Live Aid. So, my heart pounding in a way that I've quite never felt it pound before. Something like the Audiard film, the beat that skipped my heart, maybe. And then, of course, the inevitable fear and trepidation. But I thought, as an actor, we're very fortunate in that I think we're probably 1%, 2%, 3% of people who are tremendously qualified to be in this business, and we fortunately have this opportunity. So when something like this comes to you, you can't pass it up. Yeah.
Des questions, c'est à vous. Oui, première question, par exemple ici.
Hi, congratulations first. So now
Il y a un micro.
So, congratulations again. So now we're switching French. Je voulais savoir, après, comment on ressort d'un tel tournage, après avoir interprété ces légendes du rock.
Well, after being these rock legends on screen and on the set, how do you come out of such a film, of such characters, so to speak?
We really don't, do we? Because there hasn't been a day where we've not communicated, and we stopped shooting over 7-8 months ago. We're all on a WhatsApp group together. I have to admit it.
The group is called the Drama Queens.
Oh, it's great. It's great. It's whenever I need to smile about anything, I'll go check it out. And one day, no, it will never be published.
But did they stay with you?
I'll say this. In my yes, of course it stays with you. It's one of those roles you just don't want to switch off and go move on to the next role. It's a joy. It's the joy of a lifetime to play Freddie Mercury. For myself, I'm sure it feels the same way for you. And you have to say goodbye, but it's like being at the airport with a loved one, where you just keep turning back and you keep turning back and you keep turning back until you just have to walk away.
Well said. Other question here, please. Yes.
En français, désolé.
Pas de problème.
Le petit micro pour que tout le monde vous écoute.
Merci.
You're running fast, hein?
Je veux aussi dire que c'était génial, donc merci. Et en fait, il y a un moment dans le film où on oublie que ce sont des acteurs, et quand on voit les images à la fin, on se rappelle que en fait, ce ne sont pas les vrais personnages, donc c'est incroyable cette. Ma question, c'est comment peuvent-ils être aussi bons dans des rôles qui ne sont pas les leurs. Enfin bon, je sais plus. Je suis très émue, je suis désolée.
Well, the lady, first of all, she's absolutely congratulating you, and she's very moved to the point that she wasn't sure how she would verbalize her question. But I think, and then what she meant is that we totally forget when we see you on screen for all, on sort of that you are actors and you're not really, Freddie or Brian.
Thank you.
But by the end, obviously, how did you do it in a way to be so true? How did you make them your own to make them believable? Is that what you wanted?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, we started with. Well, I can only speak for myself. Maybe
No, you can
across
speak for both of you.
Yeah. Well, we started with the external things because they're known characters. They're real life legends. So we started with the voice and the way they move and the physicality, the way they dance on stage, and then it was a matter of trying to see how that affects the internal, which is maybe the different way around to how I would usually work. Usually I'd start with the inside and see how that affects the external. But we were all very adamant that we didn't just want to be mimics. We're not a tribute band, and we're not impersonators. So that the important thing was to try and inhabit those characters, to try and bring something of our own spirit and our own kind of soul and joy to the character as well. When we started shooting, we started with hello. Ooh, sorry. Oh no.
No?
Hello.
Yeah.
Is that on? No. Hello.
Not mine. No.
Shall I just project? I'm trained.
Mine is not working either. We're just.
Yeah.
Shall I just speak loud?
Yes.
Can you hear me at the back?
Yeah.
Great.
Theater trained.
Yeah.
Yeah, theatre train. Yes,
Oh, it makes me want to
Shakespeare.
stand up.
Yes, absolutely.
The first day of filming, we were doing the Live Aid sequence, and we had we'd worked out all of the choreography meticulously to the absolute minute detail. We knew we had to because it's such an iconic moment in history, in music history. And we did the first run through at the rehearsal that Brian and Roger happened to see, which was quite terrifying. And at the end of the run through, Brian came up to me and said, "No, that's really good. You've got the detail down. It's very precise, but don't forget that I'm a rock star." and with that comes a bit of ego. And I thought it was a really, really useful note, because what he's saying. Hello. We're back. I thought it was hello.
Yeah.
I thought it was a very useful note, because actually what he's saying in that moment is like, you've got to feel it. It's all well and good being accurate and precise in the choreography or in the singing, but actually you've got to feel it with your own spirit. And it was a really useful thing to hear on set on day one, because you had to just remind yourself of that all the time, whether it's the joy of a performance or whether it's like the emotion of some of the more intimate scenes.
What about you?
It's very similar in the way, yes? Working? Very similar in the way that I usually go from the inside out, if that makes any sense. But this, I immersed myself in all the archival footage, and that can be quite fun when you're watching Freddie Mercury every night up until 4 o'clock in the morning. And I had, physically, I had a set of teeth made for me very early on, because I knew that would be difficult to deal with, not only to talk with, but to project with singing on stage. I was very conscious as well of not doing a caricature or mimicking him. I wanted to spend enough time watching him and then trying to physically transform into a way that I was Rami underneath it all, but there was a mix of Freddie in there somewhere, and whatever happened after that, I hoped would just be the evolution of what we created together.
And you did keep the teeth, I believe.
I did.
I read that.
I was so trained into making sure nothing happened to these teeth by my phenomenal makeup artist Jan Sewell, that I couldn't even let them go at the very end.
Oh well, question over there. Oh, ici.
Hi, first, thank you very much. I'm sure it's a film that tons of fans have been waiting to see for quite a while.
Tell me about it.
Talking a bit about music, leaving aside Live Aid, which must have been monumental, what was the most challenging musical number to recreate? And also, is there a song from Queen you wished had made the cut in the movie and isn't?
I'll tell you, Live Aid was, for both of us, I can safely say, the hardest musical number to do. How many songs? 6?
Yeah.
And we started day 1, Bohemian Rhapsody. Day 2, Radio Gaga. Day 3, Hammer to Fall. Deos. Then We Will Rock You. No.
Crazy
Little Thing. Learned the guitar, never got used. We Will Rock You into We Are the Champions. Day 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, 5 day, and then there were some movements in Hammer to Fall that I just couldn't do, and I remember in rehearsal I was doing them and I couldn't figure out why, and it was only till we ran the entire sequence of Live Aid on the 7th day when I realized it was happening. I was doing everything that Freddie was doing, and in the moment, it was a sense that my adrenaline was heightened from song to song. It was elevated as each one went on, and then my body was doing things I was never capable of just doing in the moment. So it's another moment of pure elation when that happens, and you realize not only are you doing something special, but it's almost a similar feeling to what he must have exactly been going through in that moment, and that is quite frankly pretty mind-blowing.
Was that also was the most challenging to you?
Yeah, but beyond to think of a concert other than Live Aid, I think we did a concert in Budokan in Japan. And there's only such a brief moment in the film that we see now, but we did actually shoot the whole of 39. I don't know if you know that song. It's It's a folk song about time travel, obviously written by Dr. Brian May. It couldn't have been written by anybody else. And it was so difficult to learn. He plays it on an Ovation 12 string, and it's really nerdly because he wrote it and really complex. So I was having a difficult time learning it anyway. And then the scene basically was telling the story about how loved Queen were in Japan at a very early stage. So they had a number of Japanese supporting artists storm the stage, and they really weren't shy, they really went for it. So while I'm trying to concentrate on this really difficult song, I've got like 3 very attractive Japanese ladies kind of throwing themselves at me. So that was a challenge. In terms of, it was a nice challenge. In terms of a song that wasn't included in the film, but that I wish was, we hear Somebody to Love, but I would love to have performed it. It's probably one of my favourite Queen songs. And I really would have loved the challenge of trying to achieve those vocal harmonies. It's Freddie's voice at its absolute best, I think. And the way that the band harmonised together is probably the best that you ever hear in all of their music, I think.
I see you nod to that.
Yeah,
That's also a song.
I love this song. We both have talked about this, how we both love this song. And I think everyone collectively in the cast, it might be all of our favorite songs. But another one I loved to, when I was watching all the footage, was Don't Stop Me Now. I was begging the writers to put it somewhere in the film because I was ready.
You should have begged more, maybe. Question. Où est le micro maintenant? Ici?
Sure.
Good evening. How did you put yourself back in the 80s? Because the film, it's very moving. I was a teenager during the 80s, and listening to the songs brings back so many memories of that particular decade that was very different from today. And how did you do some research, or how did you put you back into this crazy decade?
Well, you had Brian's clothing.
Yeah.
Actual.
Yeah, he's very generous in donating a lot of his actual clothes from that era to the production for shooting. So the scene when we're in Jim Beach's office towards the end of the film where we're allowing Freddie back into the band, I'm wearing a white leather bomber jacket, I don't know if you remember, with shoulder pads that doubled my width, to the extent where I had to kind of walk sideways through doors. But I think, that's a big part of it actually, the extravagant costumes, because there's some of them are so outrageous that you have to rise to the level of the costume. You can't be subtle and kind of diminutive in a costume like that. You have to have some kind of blasé, I suppose, or kind of bravado. Yeah.
I will agree. The costumes they helped immensely. I've never worn this many costumes in any job, and I don't think I ever will. And it required quite a large amount of time in fitting. And I thought, this is going to be some great rehearsal time for me. If I'm trying on clothes, which I'm sure Freddie loved to do, let me go get in hair and makeup first. And so I would spend all those countless hours spinning around and enjoying being as flamboyant and audacious as he was with the people around me. Nothing too controversial or forward with anybody, but if I got a little tired in a costume fitting, I'd be like, well, why hasn't anybody got me a cup of tea yet? Things like that, and someone would be like, well, I don't know how to react to this, but I should probably go get him a cup of tea.
And they did.
And they did. They did. But I said, hey, if we're going to be here together, let's try this out, right? Why not?
Question ici.
So Rami, first of all, your movies are just getting better and better. So thank you so much for today.
Work in progress.
Work in progress.
So I just wanted to know, regarding today's role, which part of Freddie Mercury's life did you like the most? His ups, his downs, his public, his private life? Which one did you enjoy playing the most?
in the spirit of how Freddie would respond, he'd say, "All of me, darling." I liked all of him. I mean, because that's what I found out, is there was not one side or the other. You can say there is, but it's not so black and white, right? It's not binary in that way. He's all at once so many different things, and such a complicated, rich human being with so many complexities. So I think most, to be quite honest, you know, prancing across the stage as Freddie Mercury in some of the concert sequences is just about the most fun you can have. Once you start to embody him, before that it's a very, very scary experience.
Question ici.
Thank you again for this movie, and congratulations to both of you. My question is, what was it like working with Brian as a director, and what's going on in your mind when you're telling yourself that you're playing an iconic and legendary rock group? Thank you.
It's nice having Brian May there present the whole time. Not the whole time, but from the very beginning, he came and kind of gave us a real strong sense of support. I remember being in between Brian May and Roger Taylor, and they were watching my first, basically, audition at Abbey Road as Freddie together, and I thought they had seen it before I arrived, so that was a really sticky situation to be in. And Roger, I really couldn't make out what he was thinking, but Brian at one point started to nod and smile, and that meant everything to me. And I feel that, you know, for the both of us, he's been quite a lifeline through everything. Yeah, it's as simple as that.
And you certainly had a very different and unique relationship with Brian when he came on set, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it was that as soon as I met him, there was fear and trepidation before meeting him, but he disarms that straight away with his generosity, and he kind of came straight up to us all and gave us a big hug, and you could sense his excitement that the project was being made. It's been a long time in the making, so to actually get in a room and see 4 actors there ready to go, I think filled him with a certain amount of excitement, and just having his support alleviated any feelings of pressure and fear. And he was very present for us all throughout the shoot, not just to give advice about technical things, about playing the guitar or about memories of certain concerts or memories of Freddie, but just to spend time with him as a human being, to be in a room with him, to talk to him, particularly playing him. It just meant that having that connection, speaking to him as an equal, you absorb something of his spirit, and you absorb his gestures and his voice. And there were moments where we'd be talking in a group and I'd be stood next to Brian and we'd be listening to somebody else, and we both just kind of find ourselves doing exactly the same gesture, and I'd turn to him and go, "Oh, sorry, Brian, sorry." We started to just shadow, or I started to mirror him, which probably freaked him out. But it was just wonderful spending time with a beautiful human being, really.
Well, yeah, me too. Talking to him as Freddie on set was quite an odd experience. And I thought, you know, go back to Rami, but I couldn't. I mean, when I was in it at work, I was in it. Afterwards, trying to, you know, go to a restaurant, I could sort of slip out of it and order food as myself, but sometimes it was impossible if it was a long day.
Yes, over there, please.
Thanks for the movie. Loved it. Question: before the set, how long did it take to prepare the characters?
Go on.
I mean, I was told that this was my role about maybe from now 2 years ago. So I probably almost like a year and a half prior to shooting, I knew that it was mine. But I never quite believed it, and this was a film that Graham King and Dennis O'Sullivan had the rights to, but there was no studio involved. So I knew they were still shopping it around town. And at that point I thought, a studio can still pick this up and change the actor like that. So I thought I had two options. I can just try not to think about it, or I can pull the trigger and start getting ready. So I flew myself to London and started piano lessons and started singing lessons and dialect coaching. And I found someone to help me with the movement choreography named Polly Bennett, who was a lifesaver. And we just started working. And I think my enthusiasm was, I think that may have encouraged something to get the ball rolling, perhaps. And I think it paid off in a way, because I did feel nearly as confident as I needed to be when we started. Otherwise, you can't enter a world like that without feeling that you're coming in with a strong sense of preparation.
And what about you?
Yeah.
The guitar?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a bit different. I was attached to the project maybe a month and a half before we shot. So not a huge amount of time to try and turn into a guitar legend. But again, it was just hard work. We were together as a band for a month leading up to the Live Aid, the first week of shooting Live Aid. And that month was spent mostly working and rehearsing on that Live Aid footage. But we'd also hang out together, and we had lots of hours spent in bars and restaurants as part of a bonding process. Yeah, and but also just playing together. When we were on set, we were often playing to a backing track, but when we rehearsed, we plugged in on quite a few occasions to actually play together as a band, because it's really important to have that bond, to hear each other, to hear Ben on the drums, and to be connected to each other. And actually being plugged in like that informed so much of the way that we moved around and interacted with each other. So that was very useful.
Yeah, but you did also have quite an amazing moment with Brian and his own guitar.
I did. Yeah. We had some pre-record sessions in Abbey Road in London before filming, and we were all there, and we'd had a morning of work, and then at lunchtime everyone was sitting having some dinner, and Brian kind of leant over to me and said, "Do you want to go and have a jam?" And I was like, "Yeah, please, yeah," in Abbey Road. And so we went into the studio where some legends have recorded, the Beatles. And
I got to play that piano at one point.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Played a Queen song on that piano.
That's amazing. It's a really special place. You should all try and go. But we sat down, and Brian said, "Do you want to play my guitar?" Now, if you don't know, there is only one of his guitars. He made it when he was a teenager, him and his father, out of old bits of rubbish around the house. So like the neck is made out of a fireplace. There's some bits of his mum's buttons laid into the neck. There's a bit of a knitting needle and a part of a bike saddle, all that kind of thing. It sums him up perfectly. It's eccentric, it's eclectic, and it's genius all at once. And he sat down and just let me play his guitar with him, and he said, "Okay, so what do you want to do?" And at the time we were doing all of the Live Aid stuff, so I said, "Well, let's just work through the concert and do the solos from Live Aid." He was okay, yeah. So we started with Bohemian Rhapsody, and one of the most iconic guitar solos that's ever been. And we're there playing it together, and it's going pretty well. I'm like, oh, I'm getting away with this. And we get to the end, and he goes down one path, and I go down another. He's like, no, that's not how it goes. And I said, well, actually, Brian, that's how you played it in July 1985 at Live Aid. And it was this very surreal moment where he said, oh, that's nice. Yeah, I might do that again. So the tables turned. Just for a brief second, I got a chance to teach Brian May, which was surreal.
Question with yes, please. That's a great story. You must have many great stories, I'm sure.
Yeah. Check out the WhatsApp group.
We will, now that we know.
Il y a eu ces derniers mois pas mal d'inquiétudes sur le traitement du sida, de l'homosexualité dans le film. Je voulais savoir s'ils s'attendaient à ces critiques, ces inquiétudes plutôt, et s'ils les ont compris.
There was lately, some concerns in the press that the AIDS thing was not really, approached too much, or that the homosexuality was a bit not approached enough. What are your thoughts about it?
Well, I saw that, and I think something came out that I said in an article that I think I was speaking to a journalist at that same time, which was months ago, and obviously the delay of articles coming out. It was felt a bit awkward of having someone judge that off of a 1 minute teaser of a trailer that was 98% music. So I think clearly we didn't make the movie where you see the gratuitous, salacious aspect of Freddie Mercury's life. I don't want to make that movie, especially with, this sounds odd, but the relationship that I have to him now, all I want to do is celebrate him. And I think in what we do, in the way that we gently and elegantly touch on those subjects, brings the magnitude of how joyful he is to life. It just lifts it up, and that's the film that we wanted to make, purely a celebration of Freddie Mercury, and pointing those things out and showing them elegantly, like I said, only elevates his story and his relationship to us.
And it's also, a film about really, that's how I felt, and I'm sure many did, about the actual creation of that unique sound, about the bonding and the theme of the family, which I think is very important. That's how I felt. Yeah. Is that also, you felt family was also one of those main themes, right?
Absolutely. The thing that made Queen so unique and so successful is that there were 4 incredibly talented, virtuosic musicians, but whose talent only really worked when they were together. They all tried at various times to go down solo paths, and it didn't really work for them. They kept coming back to each other because that's where their strength lay. And I think to kind of continue from what Rami was saying, but also to include what you were adding, it would belittle the individual, it would belittle Freddie Mercury to make it a film about AIDS specifically, or a film about being a gay man specifically. It's a complex story, and it all added up to this individual man who was trying to work out who he was as an immigrant child, as a bullied child, as a man working out his sexuality, as someone who had AIDS. That was all part of one human being. He never wanted to put himself into a box. And I think that was the same for every member of the band for different reasons. They were all outsiders who were looking for a sense of belonging, and they found that belonging in the band. And I think that their ability to speak to the outsiders in the audience, the ones who feel they don't belong, is again what gives them it's what gives them a great connection to their crowd and great popularity, I think.
I agree. He finishes my thoughts. You had me at hello. But seriously, I think what I'm taken by in this man is a young man who is essentially an immigrant with very unusual features that made fun of as a kid, bullied as a kid, and conflicted about who he was and his identity, his name, his sexuality, and there's something that he's longing for, and I read it in his lyrics, I see it in his music, hear it in his music, and this sense of wanting to discover his place in the world, and in the journey of making that discovery, there's a fire that's burning within him, and it's ready to explode. And when he gets to a place where that happens on stage, it's almost as if he shares that with the audience, that beautiful, magnetic violence that's erupting inside of him is a unifying factor with everyone who is watching. And together, it's as if they're elevating each other to say, you know what? We all do belong, and we all can be exactly who we want to be.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us tonight. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Testify!
Yeah, exactly. We could almost sing Standard, but we're not as good as you are. Shall we just give a clapping hand? Come on.
That's right.